Okay, good morning everybody. We wanted to talk today. We know that the philosophy of counting the Omer is we're counting towards the days of the most glorious and auspicious and special and unique day of history. That if we would have said no to getting the Torah, the world would have self-destructed. Because Yom Hashishi, you know in the Torah it's the day that all days, those people that know business, the world was created on a contingency. And what was the contingency? That we will accept the Torah. So every day of the Omer, we're yearning and preparing and counting towards what? The 50th day of the Omer, which is the most awesome and important and vital day of history. So that's why we read Pirkei Avot, to fix our character, so we shouldn't make the same terrible mistake as who? The students of Rabbi Akiba. And also we know another very beautiful thing. How many ways, Mr. Cohen, do we have to get the Torah? The Braita in Pirkei Avot, the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot teaches us that to have a complete understanding and have like the Torah on the palm of your hand, so you be very proficient in it, you have to possess 48 different paths of wisdoms. So the great Ba'alei Musar, our great mentors and teachers, teach us that watch out, that every day of the Omer corresponds with one day of path of wisdom. There's 49 days and there's only 48 paths of wisdom. So the 49th day we have to review all the 48. And this is again because we Jewish people, the Ramchal, the greatest Kabbalist of all, says that the day of Shavuot is a rejuvenation. Rejuvenation with a J-E-W. It's not only a commemoration of the most glorious day of history. Understand, gentlemen? The day of Shavuot, again, if we are prepared and we have filtered and we're worthy, God again will give us the Torah. You understand? So let's review two of the paths to wisdom. These are such important things to have in life that will enhance our life. It'll make us better human beings, make us wiser human beings. Yesterday, Shabbat, was the 21st day of the Omer. Does anybody remember what the 21st path of wisdom was? Key to unlocking and being worthy of God's wisdom? Lev Tov, right? You remember that? Yeah. Lev Tov, which I'm not going to dwell on it too much, the Rambam says that a person has to have a good heart. And the Maharal explains so eloquently and beautifully. We know that Torah is considered the greatest gift of all time. Like we say in the prayer of Shabbat, Mincha, right? What do we say? Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al ta'azovu. God says, I've given you a most special gift. A very good, wholesome gift. Don't forsake my Torah. So therefore the Maharal explains beautifully. If you have a heart full of, you harbor hatred, or you're jealous, or you have depression, or you have weakness, or you have anxiety, you don't trust God, you're always nervous because you don't believe God runs the world, and you have malicious feelings towards people, right? If the Torah is Tov, and your heart is not such a good heart, is it going to, Torah come into you? Is it going to synthesize? No. So therefore, since the Torah is considered Tov, right? It is worthy only to come into the mind and heart of somebody that is what? Also? Tov. And the Rambam explains this attribute so beautifully as that this is probably one of the most beautiful parts of the Rambam that I really like. You know what Rambam says Lev Tov means?
Good heart.
Well, practically what does it mean? Good heart is a very general term, my dear cousin. Lev Tov means, the Rambam says this in Shmone Prakim, Mi shekol kavanato la'ativ livnei adam begufo. Somebody that in every which way possible, he wants to help people. Whether physically, whether through giving them good advice, whether giving them money. Bilti she'asik nezek o bizayon. Of course, he's not going to put himself in danger for the sake of other people. And so this is, guys, we know that God is the ultimate giver, right? So a lev tov means if every opportunity to help another person. If you remember the lecture of Moses, that he was so sympathizing, and it's a wonderful thing that we have to emulate the Almighty. And what does it mean to emulate the Almighty? Every opportunity we have, in any which way possible, to be kind and help people, whether it's giving them good advice, whether it's physically helping them, whether it's giving them a loan, whether it's helping them start a life together, that's what lev tov is. Does anybody know what today's attribute is? What day of the Omer is today, gentlemen?
22nd.
Today is the 22nd day of the Omer. And today's attribute is what? Emunat Chachamim. Does anybody know what Emunat Chachamim means?
Trust the Chachamim.
Right. Just like the Midrash Samuel says a very beautiful thing. It says, in the Torah in Parshat Shoftim, it says, do not deviate from what the judges, the leaders of Judaism, the masters of the Mesorah, the tradition of Judaism say, don't deviate from what they say left or right. So therefore, if we make fun or we don't completely believe in the oral Torah, it's impossible to progress and become a real Talmid Chacham, become a real smart person.
Rabbi?
So, yes, sir.
The oral Torah is more important than the written Torah?
In a practical way, yes. That's why in Shir HaShirim he says, Ki tov dodecha miyayin. Your friends are better than you. In a way, the oral Torah is more precious and vital to our survival even than the Torah itself, because we can't completely understand the Torah. And gentlemen, I'm a big fan of history. There was a million Jews around 1,000 years ago, just like we have millions, unfortunately, of Reform and conservative Jews. Around 1,000 years ago, Rav Saadia Gaon, which wrote the first Jewish book on philosophy, he wrote it because there was Karaites, Karaim, and they rejected the oral Torah. And there was a time, it's brought down in the Jewish history books. Mr. Agalar told me this, and he's a big expert on Jewish history. There was close to 1.5 million Karaite Jews in Iraq and Iran. And you know how many of them are left today? Few hundred, maybe 100 in Israel. Anybody?
Are they direct descendants of those?
Yeah, they claim they are. So can you imagine an organization, a community that had 1.5 million people after 1,000 years? They dwindled, and they don't even exist anymore. Why? Why don't the Karaim Jews exist anymore? Because they rejected the oral Torah. We have to, and I'm going to tell you an amazing personal story that happened with me and somebody in the Kenisa. He's a Kohen, exactly 18 months ago, about how we have to trust and believe the Chachamim. So the Midrash Shemuel, one of the great commentaries on Pirkei Avot, it says even if you reject one of the rabbinic mitzvot, God is not going to help you understand the secrets of the Torah, right? The Zohar and the holy works of the Arizal. And obviously, R.Haim explains, if you trust and have reverence and believe the Chachamim, then you're going to study the Talmud. And you're going to study because the Torah is a very ambiguous book. The Torah is a mystery. Nothing of it is really practical. Like tefillin. All of you guys are wearing tefillin. The tefillin has thousands of details. How to write it, how to construct it. Are any of them brought down, delineated in the Torah? None of them. None of them are spelled out in the Torah. It's all from what? The oral Torah. So therefore, if you trust and believe in the Chachamim, that's going to cause you what? To become an expert in the Talmud. And the true light of the Torah, gentlemen, the The Christians and Muslim also basically accept the 5 books of Moses and the books of the prophets. What makes our Torah, our relationship to the Torah, so holy and unique and makes us elevated and different than them? What gives the Judaism its special flavor? Because all the other religions also accept the written books. You know what it is? It's the oral Torah. You understand? So, I have to tell you such a interesting story. It's an amazing, amazing story. Around 18 months ago, we went to one of the greatest rabbis of our generation that we truly have to ask God that God should give him life and health for 120 years because he's such an awesome and individual. His counsel is like getting counsel from the Urim Vetumim. R.Haim Kaninevsky, I had the great pleasure of being with him 3-4 times. So in this temple, in this holy synagogue, I had 2 very, very beloved students and congregants that were not getting married. So we decided to, not last summer, the previous summer, we went to the great Sadiq and Gaon, really the pillar of Torah of our generation. Especially now that there's such a void, we don't have Rav Ovadia Yosef, La'avdil ben Chaim L'Chaim, Zichrono Livracha. So we went to Rav Chaim, and this Kohen, Rav Chaim saw him and he said, you know what? He said, Rebbe, I need a bracha because I'm not married. So you know what he said? He said, you're a Kohen and you don't have a beard? You for sure have to grow a beard. Because, right, usually Orthodox rabbis have beards. And the true teachers of Torah traditionally were the Kohanim. This rabbinic movement is a new thing. Historically, the prophet Malachi tells us, Ki sifteh Kohen yishmero Torah mipihu. The true, authentic teachers of the Torah to the Jewish nation that not only bless us, but they also educate us in the Torah learning is who? The Kohanim. So he said, if you want to get married, I'm going to give you a blessing, but there's a few conditions. The first condition is what? You have to grow a beard. Okay. Then he said there's a second condition. It was in the summer, and you know, if you have ever been in the Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak is a suburb of Tel Aviv, it's very humid and warm. So he said, you're wearing short sleeves? No. This is unacceptable. This is not modest. You have to wear what? Long sleeves. And you know, Rav Chaim Kaninevsky is very short and sweet. Since he literally sees hundreds of people a day, he said, go off on your merry way. So we were taking a taxi back from Bnei Brak to the holy city, which we miss every day of our lives that we're not living there and we can't have access to it. We're here in LA, unfortunately, Yerushalayim. So the whole way back we were debating with Mr. Cohen whether he should grow the beard or not. He said, Rabbi, this rabbi's advice doesn't make sense. I need to look handsome. And he tells me to grow a beard? I don't want to take his advice. So he didn't want to trust the rabbi. I said, listen, you need to trust the rabbi, right? What's today's advice? Key to unlocking the wisdom of Torah? To trust your rabbi. To trust the oral Torah, the Talmud, the Zohar. Because really, anybody that doesn't get direction from their rabbi and the great rabbis of the generation, our predicament that there's so much divorce, unfortunately, is not a coincidence. There's so many problems is because people don't get enough counsel from the greatest counselors. Who's the greatest counselors? The Torah. But who makes the Torah alive? The rabbis. So I kept on telling him, Mr. Cohen, please, I beg you. He said no. Anyways.
But nowadays beards are in style.
But anyways, so he was very uncomfortable with taking the advice of Rav Chaim Kaninevsky. So the bottom line is, the next morning we wanted to go daven at the Kotel, nets. It was Selichot time. Unfortunately, we didn't get up early enough to do. So we knock on his door. Rabbi, I know you need to make nets. It's a very big mitzvah. It's such a special opportunity. So, to make a long story short, after 15, 20 minutes, we missed nets, and he's not coming out, right? Because he was sleeping in a different room in the hotel that we were. So we got very worried. We were about to call security and we kept on yelling his name. So I kid you not, he told me, Rabbi, the second I put the shaver to my face to shave, I got a terrible, terrible dizziness. And I was afraid about to fall on my head and hit the marble flooring in the bathroom. And I said, listen, when you go to a Sadiq, if you don't go to the Sadiq, okay. But if you go to the Sadiq and he's giving you the advice and you don't listen to it, you're in danger. So, Baruch Hashem, now he took the advice, but he had never gotten vertigo. He had never had such a condition of having dizziness. So it's an interesting thing that the second that he decided not to grow his beard, he got a terrible, terrible dizziness, and he was literally, that's why when he kept on knocking on his door, he said he had such a terrible headache that he learned his lesson. And guess what?
He's married.
The next day, no, he didn't get married, but that was his own fault. The story has a very interesting continuation. The next day, we took a tour with my wonderful friend, God should give him a refuah shalema, Rabbi Alon Derry. We took a tour of the holy sites, the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Meir Balanes, and all of these great people. And guess what happened? He met a wonderful, wonderful Syrian girl, but after 4 or 5 months of them going out, he refused to go date her in New York, but it could have been his soulmate. So the reason why we have to trust the rabbis is because the Torah is a beautiful book, but who makes it relevant and alive to us in our lives?
The rabbis.
Is the rabbis. So we have to trust their counsel. Just 2 short halachot. When we count Sefirat HaOmer, how do we have to count? Sitting or standing? Standing. And also, when's the best time to count? 20 minutes after sunset. But if you're in a shul and you're going to forget, and Bedi Eved, which unfortunately this is the custom of this shul, right after, like a minute after sunset, you could also do the Sefirah. Have a wonderful day.